Okay, so welcome back, everybody. We'll make a start. I think everyone's finished the lunch here. So the next presentation, we've got a couple of presentations from the judges this afternoon, and then two presentations from the winning teams from the year just past, from the main challenge and the entry-level challenge. And so the first judges presentation is from Tim Fairbrother. And Tim, you're going to talk about the optional challenges in particular.
Yeah, thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Tim Fairbrother, as Simon said. I've been involved with the Railway Challenge book right since the inception 14 years ago. So I can easily remember it because my eldest child turns 14 next year. So the age of the challenge is the same age as my eldest child. So anyway, as was mentioned earlier, then I'm responsible for the rules for the challenge. I've been doing that for the last 6 years or so, I think. So today I'm going to cover the optional challenges specifically. If you've got any questions relating to any of the other challenges or the rules, then we can cover those if you require. But what we tend to do on the site visit, which will be happening in February, is to talk through each of the track-based challenges when we're on site, and then you can actually see where those track-based challenges happen around the track layout at Stapleford. We did cover that briefly. I think Bridget covered it with her map. The map is on the Railway Challenge website, so you can refer to that to understand where different things happen, where the different points are that are in the rules. But yeah, it's much easier to do that when we're on site in February. But today we're just going to cover the optional challenges. So we introduced the optional challenges this year for the 2024 event, as was mentioned earlier. This year we only have four optional challenges, and they went very successfully. So for 2025, we're introducing the fifth one, which is the Ride on Locomotive Challenge, and Malcolm is going to talk about that one in a bit more detail in the next slot. But to explain a bit about how the optional challenges work, this slide was shared earlier. So the maximum score that you can get for the optional challenge is 150 points. There is a bit of a caveat, which I'll come to in a minute relating to that. You are required to enter as a minimum one of these optional challenges. If you don't enter any of them, like if you don't enter any of the other challenges, you'll score 0 points. So to be in with a chance of winning, of gaining some points within the optional challenges, you need to enter at least one. If you enter more than one, then you've potentially got a better chance of getting a higher score. And if you enter more than one, then your maximum score from each of the optional challenges that you enter will be taken towards your grand total. So, for example, if you entered the auto coupler challenge and you got 130 points, but you also entered the location announcement challenge but got 140 points, your location announcement challenge would be carried forward for your grand total. You may want to consider your strategy in that, because entering more challenges potentially means that your competition has more of a challenge as well, because there are more competitors that they've got to enter against. So there may be some strategic choices that you want to make there if you want to challenge the teams that you're competing against. So I think the rules state that within a month of entering, which is probably around now for most teams, you're required to submit your preference order. I think during this meeting, I've seen that one team has provided a preference order. I'm not aware of any others that have done so far. The reason that we ask for a preference order is, one, to know what you're doing, but secondly, because certainly for the auto coupler challenge and the aerodynamic challenge, then those are assessed relatively, so your score is marked relative to that of other teams. And if we only have one or even two teams in those challenges, then it's very hard to give a fair relative score. So we need to know that so that we know that we've got sufficient teams for each of the optional challenges. Also, from a logistic point of view, it's more critical as we get closer to the challenge weekend next year. We need to know how we're going to fit you all in. So as it's read in the rules, then you're required to submit a preference order. If in addition to that, you can say that you are committed to entering 2 or 3, for example, rather than just 1 or just a preference order, then again, that would be useful. So, for example, you may say that you're going to enter both of these, and if you're definitely keen to enter both of those, and you intend to enter both of those, then it'd be helpful to say that rather than just saying preference 1 for location announcement and preference 2 for remote data recording, because if you just say a preference order, we don't know whether you'll necessarily do more than your first preference. This worked very well for this year. I think for the 2024 event, there was only one team who we said couldn't do their first preference, and in the event, because subsequently we clarified that there were several teams that were doing multiple, they were subsequently able to do their first preference. With the, is it 14 teams that we've got entered this year so far? Then I think there's a good chance that everyone will be able to do their first preference. And as we did this year, then we did run all of the optional challenges, and it all went very, very well. So yeah, what I would urge you to do is to put your preferences orders in as soon as you can, please. If it's possible to do that in the next couple of weeks, by say the first week of December, then we can also get back to you and confirm that that your selection is okay in terms of having sufficient teams against each of the optional challenges. So it will help you out if you can provide that response sooner rather than later. So I'd certainly encourage you to do that. If you've got any specific questions in relation to each of these, then feel free to ask. I'll just run through quickly what each of the challenges comprises. As Malcolm said in the document submissions earlier, then each of them requires a document submission, and that will be part of the assessment criteria, is to review what you've submitted. The tech spec refers to those being in an appendix. So as Malcolm said again earlier, then please submit that as a separate document so it's clear what we're assessing for the optional challenges that you're entering. So if I go through them in order, the auto coupler challenge is to develop an auto coupler solution, which so you have one half of your coupler solution on the mounted on your locomotive, and the other interfacing half is the one of the coaches from the Stapleford Railway. There's a drawing for the coupler bracket, which is on that as part of the material online, and you can mount a interfacing coupler onto the bracket on the coach from the railway, such that you've got two similar mating halves, so you develop both sides of the solution. And then, as well as the submission part, then you demonstrate it, and we time certain elements of the coupling activity. So essentially that comprises 4 stages. You approach the coach that you're coupling to, you couple. Once you're confident that you've got a positive couple, you then pull the coach back a distance, stop, you then propel it back forwards to its starting position, you uncouple, and then reverse the loco back to its starting position. And we time each of the phases of that activity, and based on that, then you get a score which is relative to the times of the other teams, and that's as well as the design element. Then we also have that demonstration element. So Felix, you got a quick question? So the question is, do you just get one attempt? So what we did this year, and what I think we'll do again this in 2025, because it worked well, within your allocated slot to do the challenge, you get one practice, you get 5 minutes to practice. So you can practice what you want, but you're not able to practice it before your allocated slot during the weekend. And then once you're happy, once that 5 minutes is over, then we move into the assess attempt. You only get one attempt to do it assessed, unless there is something outside of your control which doesn't work, in which case, for fairness, we'll allow you to rerun. If you don't successfully couple, then we will time how long it takes you to get a successful couple. So if you couple and then you try and pull away and you're not coupled, then you will time you to go back and approach and couple, or to rectify the situation. And so that will be part of the timed element, similar to the maintainability challenge. If something doesn't work right, then you're timed to rectify it.
Tim, you just mentioned that there is a drawing of the couple.
Yeah, I did mention a drawing. Yeah,
drawing?
yeah. So So Simon's just saying that there is a drawing, which I mentioned. So yeah, I can't remember what the reference is of it, but it's one of the drawings on the Railway Challenge website.
There is another question online about specifically the autocouple.
Okay.
Yeah, you may have already mentioned it, so I wasn't. It's
Have you got your mic on?
I have, yeah. It's from Carl McLean. I'm not sure which team that is, but it's about the person who is controlling the train during the autocoupler. Are they allowed to walk alongside, or should?
So, yeah, the question, yeah. So this year the controller was, or the driver was walking alongside.
Yeah.
If it's a ride-on loco, then I think that we would expect the driver to be on board,
yeah,
if that has been suitably validated. So,
I wouldn't go that far this year.
Maybe not this year. So yeah. So we'll maybe take that away then, if you've got a ride-on loco. What we do need to review this year, we didn't have a coach. Normally, if you've got a non-ride-on loco, then the driver is sat in a coach behind the loco to drive. We didn't have that this year, but we did have issues of some people walking backwards. So we do need to review the process that we use. And yeah, it may be that we have a second coach, which is then so a coach behind the loco, which the driver could use, and then a second coach, which is the one that they couple to. So
maybe the answer is to be confirmed.
Yeah, I think the final process that we use, I think we do need some further discussion on.
Yeah.
If there is a specific as part of that which is going to impact what a team is doing, then it would be useful if they could clarify it to us, because I can't see anything that would affect
send it in as a question.
Yeah. Okay. I can't see anything critical that affects how they develop their solution.
I guess the crucial thing in my mind is, can the operator see the coupling device as they are approaching the other locomotive?
No, the rules are quite clear. The rules are quite clear that they will be penalised if they have to move down and actually look at the coupler. Okay. So it's based on a real railway challenge. If you're on the real railway, then you don't want the driver to have to get out and check the coupler unless it's absolutely necessary. You want them to be able to do everything from the cab and stay in the cab.
Yeah. So
camera.
And real trains do sometimes crash into the trains they're coupling to.
Yeah. Okay. If you look online, you can see some fascinating videos from other countries around the world where people are railway workers are stood between vehicles as they clang together. We don't do that in the UK though. So was there another question somewhere in the room? Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so we're quite clear that it's meant to be an automatic coupler. So the intention is that when you approach that couple, the coupling should be automatic and should not require any checking by the driver. But there is a requirement for the driver to have an indication on their control that the coupling has been successfully made. Okay, yeah, we'll keep moving. So conscious that time's ticking on. Aerodynamic drag challenge. This is not really a demonstration challenge, but you're required to use a model which could be a wind tunnel model or a CFD or other computational model of your locomotive, to determine what the aerodynamic drag is on your locomotive. The requirements for this is to do the assessment with the locomotive traveling at 50 kilometers an hour. That's above the maximum speed that we have at the railway, obviously, but aerodynamic drag becomes more relevant at higher speeds. Therefore, the assessment needs to be done at that higher speed of 50 kilometers per hour. And then we evaluate what the drag load is on your locomotive relative to that of other teams. We expect, as part of the assessment of this, we evaluate that your model is representative of the locomotive that you have built, and we may put some adjustment into the results if your model is not representative and gives an advantageous result relative to the loco you have built. The ride-on locomotive challenge, I'll leave Malcolm to talk about that. The only thing that I will mention, as it says, and that is that it's got this 100 bonus points. So ride-on was, it was in as an option in 2024, but it didn't have any points value. What we've done is incorporate it into these optional challenges this year, because we see this as quite a significant undertaking for teams with with a number of steps that you need to go through. If you are able to successfully go through all of the steps of this challenge and deliver a ride-on solution to the satisfaction of the judges, then there will be this 100 bonus points available. So in theory, that means that if you are successful in doing this, then you have the potential to get more points than any other team, any non-ride-on team. But that's not guaranteed. So those 100 bonus points are only available if you are fully successful with everything else in that challenge. And it may be that only a proportion of those 100 additional points are given, not the full 100. The location announcement challenge is to detect the position of the loco, as it says. So there are, I think it's 8 positions around the track on the railway, and at each of those points there needs to be a audible announcement and a visual indication as defined in the tech spec to announce to people stood by or on the train where the locomotive is. That is assessed. If you entered that competition this year, then note that one of the points has changed for 2025. And the other thing to note in that, if you do use any track-based equipment, then you will be required to place it before your run and remove it after your run to avoid any incompatibility with any other team's locomotive. And then the final one, the remote data recording and monitoring challenge, is to monitor various data signals. There are 10 data signals which you're required to monitor and report on. So that should be recorded, but then it's also required for there to be a live feed to a screen which is in the station area of the railway, showing what the status of each of those 10 data signals is on your locomotive as it goes around the track. So that's the remote aspect of it that needs to be recording that and giving a live feed, but also have a record of historical data from that is recorded as well. So that's a brief summary of those optional challenges. Time for any other questions now, or do you want to park them for the end of the session?
Maybe if there's any specific ones.
If there are specific ones, I've not found them yet. So
None in the room. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim.
Thanks.
So now, kind of following on from that, Malcolm will talk about the ride-on aspect. Come on. Sorry, Malcolm. Right, ride-on loco issues.
allowed to view the look at what is the camera.
Nothing to say about theory. Yeah, they should be doing the driving position for
The camera from the garden.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Right, just share the screen.
Yeah. So yeah, we're wanting.
Okay. So a camera viewing the operation.
You should be okay there, Martin. The first one, it seems you have to click on there and then.
Some of the background to the issue of ride-on locomotives is that at the beginning of the competition, they're actually specifically banned because we didn't really know what we were going to get, and we were very concerned about the safety of team members if they were riding on something that wasn't assured as being something that was safe to travel on. In those days, most of the teams fielded petrol generator powered locomotives. One team provided a very early hydrogen fuel cell, which might have been even more worrying. But with the move to non-liquid fuel locos and different risks and learning about the competition, we felt that this was a challenge we could take on. But there are lots of things that teams who are going to pursue this challenge need to take into account. I've listed some here in summary, but pay particular heed to the tech spec and the rules. But obviously, safety. Think about risk assessment. Think about top events that could happen to your driver. The driver could fall off. The loco could topple over on top of the driver. You could put sudden emergency brake on and eject the driver from the seat. Think of those sorts of risks. I've listed there collision, derailment, overturning, fire, electrical shock, but also things like sharp edges, finger traps, clothes becoming snagged. And for heaven's sake, don't do things like saying, well, we've provided a couple of handles for the driver to hang on to. Because if the driver's hanging onto handles, how's the driver going to drive the train? So to just think it through very carefully indeed. The other thing is to think about comfort. I know that the comfort of the wagons in the competition isn't all that great, but perhaps you could think about providing a padded seat, for example, or a seat back with at a reasonable angle, and think where the feet are going to go. It's no good providing a seat if there's nowhere for the feet. We've specified 5th percentile female to 80th percentile male, and the overall height of the loco plus driver needs to be within the gauge. So take account of all those things. The gauge drawing is on the website. That's the one that was put in a little bit later. Need visibility forward and to side. Forward, sides is okay. Rearward visibility is not vital. You can twist round in the seat. You could have rear view mirrors, could have rear view cameras. We have not required, though, a full bi-directional locomotive in the way that you would expect if you were designing a mainline locomotive. So that's this penultimate point. But we haven't prohibited a team doing that if they want to propose something. The other thing then is back to dynamics, is think about the dynamics of the loco with and without a driver. If you treat me as a driver, that's about 100 kilograms more or less, depending on how whether the driver's on the loco or we perhaps conclude between us actually it's not fit and you've got to drive from the carriage behind. So you don't want to find that all your carefully designed wheel unload calculations go wrong if you're not allowed to put the driver on.
We've got vampire now, so they can try with or without.
Indeed, yes, you've now got vampire, so you can try it. Now, this was our starting point. Top left, I've missed one, I think. That was the starting point. It's the FSMR's diesel loco. It's petrol powered, but it's got a door in the side for driver to get in and out. It's got, clearly, I've indicated with a terrible red line drawing where the driver might put his or her feet. So that was our starting position. But we're very conscious that actually there are other ways. It's not, this isn't quite the same with the steam loco that they provided. Nigel Harris is there, yes. Harriet Watt provided something that's not a million miles away from what we saw in the diesel. Perhaps that door might be a bit higher, but that was their proposal in their entry-level team last year. But since the last competition, I've been to an open day of a model railway society in Rugby, and they had all sorts of different locomotives. For someone that not a million miles away from a loco, effectively putting the front seat of the first wagon on the back of the locomotive. This one's not is a little bit different, but it's got a comfortable seat. That one is like sitting on a pimple. But you're all seeing a variety of different solutions for the same sort of thing. In the end, you have to make your submission to us. The quality of your submission, the quality of your risk assessment, and then the actual evidence of what you bring to site will allow the judges to make a judgment with you as to whether we feel it's fit to run on Stapleford Railway with a driver on the locomotive. And the rules in the tech spec do provide for you to be able to control the locomotive from the first carriage if we conclude actually it's not right. I'm confident that if you pay heed to all the things I've mentioned here, and particularly do things like, let's build a mock-up out of cardboard and see what it's like, or MDF, something like that, so you see what it feels like before you actually construct it out of metal. That will help. So many things that I've discussed there, and we discuss in this forum, we see on real trains, and it's quite frequent that designers of real trains build mock-ups of drivers' cabs out of MDF and plywood to get real drivers to try it out and see, well, actually, this doesn't quite work, and it'd be better if that control was there and we had something in front of us here to work out all the human factors and all the safety requirements. So that's my advice to you, is if you go for this challenge, think very carefully about safety and human factors and comfort, and I don't think you'll go far wrong. We expect, as a result of, if you do a ride on locomotive, the locomotive will actually be longer than it would be without. But once again, read the tech spec very carefully. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Malcolm, could you just go back a slide? There'll be some questions on it, actually. Can I just ask mine? Yeah. How's that one? What did you say?
That's
Oh no, sorry, it's that one I was thinking of. You said he was sitting behind.
Well, effectively, he's sitting behind the loco, but it's still part of the same loco. It's not a tender as such.
Is that overhang? Is there an
Is it,
axle below?
there might be an axle below it. I can't tell entirely from the photograph, but that one certainly is an axle below.
Yeah.
So it's one frame.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, sorry, I think there was some question. Tim first, then Felix.
Yeah, I was just going to note, as per the rules, then teams are required to submit their concept design for their ride-off loco by the end of February before they start any detailed design or manufacture. So I may have missed it, but I don't know.
I didn't mention that. Thank you, Tim. So Tim was saying that if you are proposing a ride-on locomotive, submit your concept design by the end of February, I think you said.
At the latest.
At the latest. And we will respond to that within a fortnight.
Yeah, because if you're if your design is not going to be acceptable, we will tell you at that based on your concept design, and you may need to amend it accordingly.
And if we think your design's not acceptable, you might be required to amend it.
And then Felix had a question.
Felix?
I think the state similar to a design which operates on an existing railway is not a safety assessment, a risk assessment, or anything like that. Because there's a big temptation to look at these pictures and say, oh, well, ours looks like that, and that's safe, but it's not.
Thank you, Felix. Felix is saying, just because I've shown you these pictures doesn't mean that you can crib them and come up with something that's safe. You've still got to do your own thorough risk assessment.
Over time,
Indeed.
Especially if you're on top of it or underneath
Yes,
it.
underneath it.
So I've got, we're not looking this year to do, but potentially next year. I know you alluded to a tender. If a tender was to be put on for our team next year, would it be allowed or is it explored?
We have had locomotives in more than one unit before. I can't remember whether we've specified it has to be one frame or not. I don't think we've restricted it.
The one thing that we have changed for this year is that if you have multiple bodies, then you have to provide an accelerometer mounting point for right to put on each. And we reserve the right.
So that's
on any vehicle.
So that's the constraint. If you provide two bodies, each one's got to have a mounting point for an accelerometer. Bridget.
Whilst we might be able to say for the 100 kilo, whatever your driver weighs, by putting in something else, that would be very difficult to compensate for the centre of gravity position.
Yes, Bridget's making the point that when you're considering with and without a load, also take account of the change in height of centre of gravity. I've never worked out fully how you take account of the centre of gravity of a person who's sitting, but I'm sure that's possible.
Looking at these pictures, most of the Shackleton ones that you showed, the centre of gravity
It is pretty low.
within
Yes.
the vehicle anyway. Some of these, the centre of gravity is of the person is, even if you take about a belly button level,
Yes.
is around the top of the loco.
Yes, indeed.
There are some that are related to the rules, so it might be best to do a Tim and Malcolm. Yeah.
No, if you don't like to Sheffield, we'll just carry on. I know we're slightly running behind, but carry on with some questions.
So for those online, I think seeing as the judges, we've had quite a few questions with the presentations. We'll do questions to the judges now, if you do want to put them in. So one's just appeared actually at the. Okay, yes. So we have one about the entry level competition. And the optional challenges, can they include, essentially, can they include designs for the optional challenges in their entry level submission?
There's nothing stopping them, and the entry level competition doesn't specifically include the optional challenges, but if they include design material for it, then I think it would naturally be incorporated into their design report. Submission.
I guess it would be viewed positively as a
Yeah.
Get marks under the
No, because there are no optional challenge marks available for entry level teams.
Okay, so that's answered that one. I think this one. As written, it's as far as I've seen in previous models. There's no space for an onboard operator However, do we need to consider it according to this usual? I think that's basically it, saying I've not seen previous entries with onboard operation. I think that the answer to that question is essentially that it's a new rule that is coming in, and for this year it is optional. If you are designing a new locomotive, it is probably worth considering design for an onboard operator, as there is a chance that this rule could become.
It's possible that it
Mandatory
could
at some
become
point.
mandatory at some point. We can't say that with any certainty at this point in time, but that may be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think there were 2 teams this year that did have provision, albeit that we didn't allow them to operate with an onboard driver.
so yes, it is also sensible if you are designing to be on board to also have the option to a remote control to operate it from the trailer behind.
But they must do. Yeah.
They must do.
Yeah. That's
okay.
what we said.
Okay.
Yeah. Or
That's in the
Malcolm
rules.
said.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where the specific point about considering the mass and the center of gravity with and without an onboard driver is critical, because if you provide for an onboard driver, we may not permit you to operate your locomotive, and therefore they may need to sit in the training coach.
Okay, great. This one, I think it's basically about having a roof over so if they have a driver's compartment that a driver would sit in if they were sitting on board, I think what they're asking is, if the driver wasn't present, could they have a roof to cover that section? And if they did have a driver, would it be acceptable for the roof to be left away from the loco, or would the loco be considered incomplete if the roof was left behind? Hopefully I've explained that well.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah,
to me.
seems reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there
It's
is
like a sports car with a soft top and a hard
Yeah.
top.
yeah.
I guess so, yes.
I guess related to that, we may need to provide some guidance on how we do the water test under scrutineering.
Yes.
I don't know whether we can provide an answer today.
Would it matter if the driver's compartment got wet, or would that be unacceptable?
If they've got vital electronics in the driver's compartment, but what we'd encourage them is to keep wiring and any other services away from the driver's compartment.
Yeah.
But they've still got to protect the controls.
Yes, the controls would be out in the open in the
Yeah,
same way
yeah.
a remote control would be.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions from Binet Harriet Watt. I haven't read them yet, so this is live. For the risk of overturning, is this to the extent that a roll hoop needs to be provided if the loco was to go upside down?
No,
No. Yeah.
you need to demonstrate the risk of overturning is acceptably low, so that we don't have to consider that.
Yeah.
I also believe there'd be issues with the loading gauge, because
Potentially.
the human element of a loco exceeds the loading gauge, and therefore a rolling cage to protect them.
But the human element shouldn't exceed the new loading gauge.
I see, yes.
Yeah.
And if there was going to be a rolling element, then we'd be requiring the driver to be strapped in. That's taking us to a place we really don't want to go.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
The second question. Oh, sorry, let me just digest this.
I'll just say whether you roll over it also use one high tool or something like that. You couldn't.
You could use vampire to simulate rollover. Yeah.
Yes, is the answer to the second question. Are we allowed to leave passive provision, i.e. not change our current frame design, but not enter the optional challenge on the understanding it wouldn't be used by the driver? That's okay. If they provided provision, but don't seek to use it, don't enter that challenge, that's fine.
Okay.
But you won't get points for that.
There won't get any points. Yeah. It won't be assessed. Yeah. And it wouldn't. Yeah. And similarly, it probably would. It wouldn't almost certain that it wouldn't be accepted in future years either. I guess that's from a team that has provided a solution in this year.
Yeah.
It's intending to leave it there.
It was the image I showed in the presentation.
Okay.
I think we've answered all questions except for the questions from Nuremberg on the technical spec, which I think we'll
Mhm.
get back to later.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, hang on, a new one has just appeared. Can the deadline be extended for the project outline, and can a project outline be change one's
I mean, the project plan.
Project plan, yeah.
project plan? I think that second part might be, can they update their project plan if it's already been submitted? I
Yes.
guess that might be based on the
That's-
feedback.
They might be the first project that adheres to their project plan if they don't need to change it.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yes.
They don't, once they've submitted it, it's good practice to keep it up to date. They don't need to resubmit it.
Okay, so you can update it, teams can update their project plan for their own purposes, but
Yes.
there's no need to resubmit it to the
Absolutely.
IMechE.
Yeah.
But we do want it on time, I think. don't
We do.
We're
Yeah.
not planning to change the deadline.
And
There's no plans to extend the deadline
No.
for the project.
No,
plan.
no.
Okay.
am I correct in saying there's a requirement in the design report to reflect on their
There is a requirement, yes,
and their delivery against
Yes.
their project plan?
yes.
Okay, I
Okay.
think we better move
Yeah,
on.
we're gonna
We
move
will
on
move,
this
we
way.
are
So thank you
a
very
little
much,
bit behind
Malcolm
time.
and Tim and everybody else. So we're now